Hello and welcome to EVs and Beyond. I'm Richard Edwards and today is a very exciting day for the EV motoring landscape in New Zealand. Now, we've had a few kind of momental cars in recent years as far as EV launches go. We had the original MG ZS EV that got lots of people on the road in electric vehicles. We had the Tesla Model 3 and then the Tesla Model Y. Huge volume, great performance, very popular. And then we had the BYD Atto 3, which brought high-tech features to kind of a new price range for EVs. But now we have a car launching today, which seems to be blowing all of them out of the water in regards to performance, value, range, the lot. And it looks pretty good to boot. Here, we're gonna have a look at the MG4. Now, let's have a look around the MG4, and of course the first big difference compared to most other things on the market is that it's not an SUV. That's right, we are actually getting a new electric vehicle since the Model 3, I guess, that isn't an SUV. It is a hatchback, though I have to say it has got some touches on here like this big plastic cladding down the side that do kind of nod to the fact that SUVs are popular. Now, if we come to the front, it's got this really sharp raked nose. It's quite a short overhang for a car of this size. Now, a lot of that comes down to the fact that this is a dedicated MG electric vehicle platform. It's not some petrol car like the ZS that has been modified as an electric vehicle. So that gives some format advantages. You've got a big cabin, you've got a relatively short nose and a relatively short rear. Now, unfortunately, MG did not see fit to put a frunk under here. There is an inverter and other mechanicals for them, or other electronics for the vehicle. Now, most of the MG4s are actually rear-wheel drive, though there is a performance all-wheel drive version coming. I would forgive the lack of frunk for that one, but for the rest, I'd say the same thing to every brand. Come on, MG. Now, you've got a big MG badge here. You've got this big black air dome down here. You've got a panel for your driver assist features and these really cool looking LED projector headlights with this kind of tooth look to them. I think they look fantastic. Now, if we come around the side, we have these huge big wheels here for a relatively small car. They're 18 inches. Now, on this model, the Essence, which is the kind of top spec that you can get, and then you've got batteries beside that as well, you get this really great black contrasting roof, which goes fantastically with this bright orange color. And one thing I think is really cool that MG has done is the colors are a no-cost option. Normally when you buy a car, EV or not, you kind of get one choice, a silver or a white that doesn't cost anything extra, and anything beyond that, you've got to pay more. With this, it's all part of the deal. Another great inclusion, I think, is the tinted windows. Now, people who followed us before, we had our MG ZS EV, we've still got that. We complained that the windows just didn't give a huge amount of UV protection, so we had our windows tinted. MG's kind of done the work for you and put that on there. Now, if we come around the back, so on the Essence, you've got this big double spoiler up here, and you've got this large deck one here. If you look closely, filled with little details and light strips of its own, it looks really fantastic. And of course, you got a big broad tailgate here. Now, the boot isn't massive. This is a hatchback, so you're going to lose out somewhere there. But what I noticed pretty quickly is it is very well designed. The entryway, really broad, nice firm plastic trims there. You've got some extra storage under the floor for your charging cable, or you can lower that floor down. It's just really wide and square, which means that while it is a bit on the smaller side, you can do a lot more with it. Other things to note while we're back here, we have 3 child seat tethers. Right, let's close this up and go have a look inside. It is quite a different space to what we've seen before with MG with the ZS EV. It is a lot more modern. It is surprisingly spacious for a hatchback. Now, I'm over 6 foot and big, and I'm sitting with the seat all the way back now, and I've actually got to put my seat forward in order to reach the pedals, something I don't have to do with the ZS EV. Now, let's start with running through a few basics. This is the key. It's the same basically as the ZS and other MGs as well. Now, you have a steering wheel here that is not round. It's got the squared off top, squared off bottom. It looks really sporty and I think really matches the vibe of the car. You've then got 2 screens. You've got one here in front of the driver with your kind of key information, your range, your lane keep assist, all those kind of things. And you've got a 10.25 inch screen up here. Now, this car is brand new. It's got 32 kilometers on the clock. And so we can actually pull these tabs off Now, one thing that is missing from the interior of the car is a start-stop button. We've seen that on pretty much every EV except for the Teslas, and now MG has joined that trend. You simply get inside with the proximity key and the car fires up ready to go. To get moving, you have a transmission shifter down here. You've got reverse, drive, and a park button, and once you do that, the car is active and underway. Now you've got some really nice controls here on the steering wheel. You've got these little joysticks here to move around your various menus rather than buttons, and I think they're nice and tactile, work well. They push in as a feature as well. You've got buttons here for the various display modes on the main screen here, and information, the phone, the voice assistant. The overall interior quality feels pretty good except for one thing. These door trims here do feel quite hard and cheap, and the same goes for down here. There's a few sharp edges and it's all just a bit plasticky. But then we've got to remember, this is a fairly long range electric vehicle for a price of around $56,000. The infotainment system as well, over here, it is the same basically as what we've seen in other MGs before, but I do notice that it feels just a little bit snappier, a little bit smoother. In this Essence version, it is fairly highly specified. You have GPS navigation, there seems to be live tracking on that as well, and quite a lot of information, which is really impressive. You've got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, though they are wired, and you've got various settings for MG Pilot, the lighting, your safety systems. You can really customize this car to do really whatever suits you and whatever you want, including things like one-pedal driving. You can set this for one-pedal driving. One thing that bugs me with some systems like this, where you've got a lot of information on the screen and not really that many buttons, there's no separate temperature control, for example, is you've got some quite easy to find and easy to hit buttons to get you where you need to go. So you've got a home button down here, you've got volume, you've got always got the climate control settings at the top. You can push that button, it brings the screen down. It's really simple. Now on this car, and I think all of the MG4s, it is only a single zone climate control, but you do have a heated steering wheel, you've got heated seats, so you're gonna be fine. It would be nice to have dual zone, but that's not something you necessarily get in this market at that price point in competitors. You've got to move up quite a bit to get that. Now the system is mobile connected. It's running 4G I think, and you do have the ability to use the MG iSmart app, which means you can track things like charging, you do charge timing, which if you don't want to do them in the screen itself, and unlock the car, all those kind of things. It's not a full-on drive away app like the Tesla one is, but it is still, I think, a fairly competent app to use. Now if we move down here, there is a lot of storage in this car. Now up here we have, and I'm going to pop my phone on it, a nice big easy to find wireless tray. You've got the USB ports down here, nice cup holders. They're a little bit of a reach, but they are quite big. And then you've got this big tray down here for storing everything. We've got the key in there at the moment. And if we come into the center console, it's got a nice big deep bin here, and you've got this little net here. Over here we have a really big glove box. Now the seats themselves, they are pretty good. Now in the Essence, they are a mix of fabric and synthetic leather. They are wide, they have really nice length in the base, and the driver's one is electrically controlled. There's no lumber or anything on it though, so that's a bit of a letdown, but overall a pretty comfortable seat. Let's go check out the back. Now one area that the hatchback format fails over an SUV is rear seat room. I can't sit behind myself, and many large adults will not even fit in here, let alone find it comfortable. It's fine for children and smaller adults though some children may find the high belt line means there's no view outside, and that could be a little bit uncomfortable for them. There are, however, some nice features like USB ports and handy storage pockets for phones and smaller items on the backs of the front seats. The space and the sculpting of the rear bench makes the middle seat definitely not the place to be, though it does have its own headrest. Right, let's take this for a drive. So we've got our transmission dial there. Start to get underway. Left-hand indicator. We have 150 kilowatts of power and 250 newton meters going to the rear wheels of this, the Essence model. So the actual different battery sizes, they have different power outputs. The 51 kilowatt battery gives you 125 kilowatts of power at the wheel. The 64 kilowatt hour battery, you get 150 kilowatts at the wheels, and the 77 kilowatt battery, you get 180 kilowatts at the wheels. We don't know the exact spec on the X-Power one, but I think it's well over 200, and that's going to be a performance beast. Now, being rear-wheel drive, this chassis should be, I think, a bit more responsive and lithe than most of the front-wheel drive options in the market. And I got to say, just from my early testing, the steering in this thing does feel lovely. It is very light, but it feels quite direct and precise. It's certainly better than I would have expected. The acceleration feels more than the torque figures would suggest. Yeah, this is a quick, zippy little hatchback so far. Now, the ride is pretty firm, and I think that is one of the aspects that helps with that zippy feeling, that nice directness to the steering. That probably will, maybe make it a little bit jarring on some rougher roads, but we haven't really got the time today to test that out. But I do think it is in the firmer end of the suspension setup for a car like this. Now, road noise is reasonably high, and that is on what I would consider to be some fairly smooth Auckland roads. Again, I think that comes down to what is a bit of a European firm setup, and also perhaps just a tyre choice, and maybe that's something that can be looked at in the future. Now, the brakes feel pretty good. They feel nice and responsive. There doesn't seem to be any great impact from the recovery system, which can happen, so they've done a really good job of tuning that. Now, you've got 4 levels of regen available, and they're all set through the screen. You've got low, medium, high, and then you've got an adaptive system where it kind of picks it based on the situation, also looking at the car in front. And then you've got a one pedal drive mode, which we'll pop the car into now, where when you lift off, the car of course will naturally brake, and you theoretically don't have to change or hit the brake. When you're around town, you can let all the energy go back into the battery and avoid wasting too much of it. Though interestingly, I understand you can't use that when there is too much charge in the battery. So we're at 93%, and it's literally letting us use the one pedal drive mode at the moment. I also understand that it resets every time you start the car, so that is a little bit annoying, and maybe that's something that MG can look at in the future for fixing up. You've also got an energy save mode, which just really hobbles engine power and just allows you to get the maximum amount of range out of the car. So in our case there, we by hitting that button gained an instant 30 odd kilometers on the guessometer immediately. So yeah, that's pretty handy. You have 5 drive modes. You've got snow, eco, normal, sport, and custom. Custom, you can go through and set your own parameters for various items. So yeah, lots of choice there to really set up the MG4 the way you want to drive it. Now, while we're on a relatively well marked road here, we're going to test out the MG Pilot system. So we push the button on the steering wheel. That's set the steering to follow the lines in front, and we're following the car. We've got 2 roughly marked lanes here, and it seems to be controlling the car pretty well. It is a little bit on and off, but looks pretty decent. Now, the big question is whether this is using regen on adaptive cruise control, and the answer is it is. So that was one of the big complaints about the MG ZS. When you were using MG Pilot or the adaptive cruise control, it would use the brakes instead of regen. And of course, that's not necessarily the most efficient way to drive, but I can confirm that the MG4 uses regen on adaptive cruise control. A little bit of slip from the rear on these greasy roads, but the electronic stability control was really quick to step in and do that. Though interestingly, when the electronic stability control cut in, it got rid of the energy saving mode. I think potentially it saw that I was putting a lot of power, and it said, well, you're no longer saving energy, so we're going to take that feature away from you, which is understandable. Now, interestingly, the MG Pilot actually does a pretty good job of picking up other vehicles, both in the lane you're driving and in lanes around it. Now, let's talk about the batteries. So, of course, you can get the entry-level model with a 51 kilowatt-hour LFP unit. This one here, and I think this is probably going to be the most popular model, is a 64 kilowatt-hour, and it's a traditional lithium-ion unit. Now, that has a usable capacity of just under 62 kilowatt-hours. Now, it's slightly confusing, but there's 2 ranges for the 64 kilowatt-hour models. If you go and get the entry-level Excite, it's 450 kilometers, but in this case with the Essence, because of the bigger wheels and slightly more equipment, it's 435 kilometers. Now the car we've got here has got 92% in the battery now and is showing 435 kilometers of range, but it's really too early to tell. This car is brand new. There's no chance that the car's actually managed to really do any proper calculations yet. Now, charging speed is pretty impressive for the 64 kilowatt hour models, and 140 kilowatt DC if you're going to find an appropriate charger. That's really good. Of course, it's CCS2, which is the most common charging standard now. Right, so now let's do some summing up. Now, first, let's talk safety. Now, not long before we went to shoot this, we got the announcement that the MG4 has been confirmed as having a 5-star ANCAP rating. It's pretty loaded with safety spec, as are most modern cars these days. A lot of airbags, stability control, autonomous emergency braking, all those things. So that's well taken care of. Now, let's run through a few little points about how this sits in comparison to other cars. And bear in mind, I've only had it for a day, I've had a very short drive, we'll do a lot more testing later. Am I impressed? Yes, it is a very nice car to drive, feels very modern, the technology works, and it just is a really nice experience. Now, how does it compare to other stuff out there? Should you be considering this against other models? Now, against the ZSEV, if you don't need the boot space in the back seat, it's a no-brainer. Against the BYD Dolphin, the BYD Dolphin I think is a little bit better built and has a little bit more space in the back, but this offers more range and more specification for less money, dollar for dollar, spec for spec. So that's certainly something to look at there. Against the BYD 803 or the Tesla Model 3, I do think those cars are just a little bit ahead when it comes to space and overall offering for the price. But if you really don't need that and you really just want a really good runaround hatchback for day-to-day life with good range and that looks great and drives well, I think the MG4 is a little bit of a no-brainer. I am really impressed. So thanks for watching today. We're going to have a lot more on this car, and to keep up to date with that, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and go over and regularly visit evsandbeyond.co.nz.